Good evening, and welcome to the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. You can join the meeting in person at 5555 Perimeter Drive and also access the meeting via the live stream on the city's website. We welcome public participation to the greatest extent possible, including public comments on cases. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the video on the city's website. Your questions and comments will be relayed to the Commission by the meeting moderator. Please provide a valid name and address when making comments, and please refrain from making any inappropriate comments. At this point in time, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag here on my right. If you'll all please arise. Thank you. Ms. Beal, welcome back. Will you please call roll?
Mr. Schneer?
Here.
Mr. Way?
Here.
Mr. Fishman?
Here.
Ms. Call?
Here.
Mr. Supalak?
Here.
And tonight we would like to excuse Mr. Grimes and Ms. Fox. They had prior engagements and are unable to be with us this evening. Looking to the Commission, we have acceptance of document and approval of the minutes. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the documentation and the minutes for tonight's meeting? Seeing all nods, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you for the first and the second. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
Mr. Supalak?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Schneer?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to City Council when rezoning and platting of property are under consideration. In such cases, City Council will receive recommendations from the Commission. In other cases, the Planning and Zoning Commission has the final decision-making responsibility. Anyone who intends to address the Commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. The agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. The rules and regulations of the Planning and Zoning Commission state that no new agenda items are to be introduced after 10:30 p.m. There's one case eligible for the consent agenda. It is case number 2, Gray Bar Electric at 6399 Shire Rings Road, case 21-119 CU, conditional use. Does anyone wish to remove this item from the consent agenda? Seeing no, I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Supalak. Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Schneer?
Yes.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Supalak?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Anyone in the audience intending to address the Commission on any of the administrative cases tonight must be sworn in. If you intend to address the Commission, will you please stand, raise your right arm, and answer the following in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this Commission? Thank you all. We're cruising this evening. All right, moving on to our case. Yes, we are doing, we did a little shuffling of the agenda in order to respect individuals' time in the expected application process. So tonight we will hear the Balgriffin multifamily chimney at 6138 Turvey Loop East, case 21-044 AFDP, the amended final development plan. This application is a request for a modification to alter the architectural requirements for one condominium unit to permit the chimney to be removed located within the Balgriffin multifamily development zoned planned unit development district. The site is northeast of the intersection of Avery Road and Rings Road. And Ms. Holt, you have our presentation this evening, so I will turn time over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. This is the Balgriffin multifamily chimney request, and the specific address is 6138 Turvey Loop East, and it is an amendment to a final development plan. Here on the map, you see the extent of the townhome project within the Balgriffin PUD. It's at the northeast corner of Avery Road and Rings Road. Highlighted here is the specific building that we will be talking about. There's one unit that is making this request. It's in the center of this particular building. A little bit of background for you. In 1993, the Balgriffin PUD was approved. In 1999, both the preliminary and final development plans were approved with a condition of approval that read that rear and side elevations, which will be most visible from public streets, be revised to reflect the same level of quality of materials and detailing as front elevations. And as it turned out, all of the elevations were developed the same. In 1999, the townhomes were constructed. Sometime between 1999 and now, in this one unit, structural issues have occurred. The applicant is here tonight to talk about those in detail. But here we are in 2021 with a request to remove the chimney from this particular unit. These slides show the existing conditions at the back of this one building. The yellow area is outlining the chimney in question. I would ask that you take note of the materials because what's being proposed is that the materials will match exactly. I would also ask that you take note of the role that the chimney plays in the architectural interest on this building. These two elevations provide a contrast between the existing on the top, which shows the 4 chimneys outlined in the rectangles, and then the proposed showing the 3 chimneys with the 1 chimney removed. Walking through the proposal in some detail so that everyone understands what the exact proposal is. The chimney would be removed. The stone would be saved to reuse later in the project. The stucco would be patched and painted the Sherwin-Williams quinoa color. The roofing, cricket, and gutters would also be patched. Proposed are timberline shingles in a weathered wood. The stone water table would use the recycled chimney stone to be patched. The deck would be patched, and then an electric fireplace would be installed so that no outside venting is required. We did review this application against all of the amended final development plan criteria, and staff is recommending disapproval with the following findings. Visual interest was an important element with the 1999 application, specifically that the architectural detail was supposed to be the same for front and rear. Removal of the chimney reduces the detail significantly on this facade. Secondly, the originally approved facades relied on stone-clad chimneys as a primary element of interest. Removal of one chimney in an otherwise symmetrical facade does not meet with the intent of the approved FDP. Thirdly, being able to effect a high-quality repair to the stucco, stone, paint, and roofing is unlikely given the age and weathering of the existing materials versus the new. And finally, there are other remedies such as mud jacking, permanent jacks, sistering joists for the chimney that would preserve the original architectural interest of the entire structure. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Holt. Looking to the commission for questions for staff at this point. Mr. Way.
Do we have any pictures that actually show the problems that the chimney's creating? The structural problems?
We do not, Mr. Way.
And another follow-up one, could you go back to the plan, the aerial photograph, and highlight the public streets that adjoin the development?
So the public streets are Avery, Rings, and Blunden Road.
And the intent of the original application was that that facades that face public streets were the ones of the most concern. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Any other questions from the commission for staff at this point in time? Mr. Schneer.
In the planning report, it was indicated that the Building Standards Division, they had a recommendation or suggested a recommendation for the hydraulic, the scissoring, et cetera. Could you expand on that just a bit on what process they used?
I don't want to pretend to be a building inspector or even somebody who knows too much about construction. However,
But more than me.
The way I understand it is that this particular chimney, which is cantilevered off of the floor joist at the first floor, it's now kind of too heavy for those joists and is causing this kind of rotation inside the building. The possible remedies included sistering the floor joists. This unit does have a basement. And there are certainly foundational options like the mud jacking and other kinds of jacking systems that you can use. And that's about the extent of what I know.
No, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Supelak, did you have a question?
I suppose I was going to ask, do we know this to be a widespread problem or an isolated unit at this time?
We asked about that, and to my knowledge, this is the only unit that has this issue. The applicant is here and maybe can speak to that a little bit more.
Any other questions at this time for staff? All right, the applicant is here. Would you like to come forward? Go ahead and come up to the podium here, state your name and address for the record. Thank you, sir. Did you have a presentation that you wanted to offer to the commission?
No, I think she's kind of covered the gist. I mean, I think just to reiterate, you have any of the floor choices out there.
We'll need you to turn on your mic.
Yes, it's on now. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Beal, do you need him to repeat anything?
Yep. So we have cantilevered floor joists that are supporting.
If I could have you pause for just a moment, could you restate your name and address just to make sure we have everything on the record?
Yep. Scott Baker, 1565 Dale Ford Road, Delaware, Ohio. Okay. Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. So to answer your question, I don't have much to say, but what we have is floor joists that are cantilevered out, supporting a lot of stone, and they have the weight of the stone is causing the floor joists to sag on the outside, which is creating a noticeable hump in the middle of the great room. And it's enough deflection that, from what I understand, is that the sliding glass doors that you can see on the back of the wall, they no longer function. So it's substantial. And why I appreciate the building department's comments for items like mud jacking. I don't even know technically what that is. I mean, I do 100 restoration type jobs a year. Leveling of uneven concrete is mud jacking, but that's not applicable here where we don't have any concrete to speak of supporting this chimney. Sistering joists, is a possible option to do those kind of things, though. I mean, this chimney will need torn off of the building to repair everything back the way it was. Put sister joists in. I mean, we could be looking at removing mechanical systems in the basement, plumbing, electrical, the deck on the back of the building to do that kind of work.
Thank you, sir. Looking to the commission, do you have any questions for the applicant at this time? Mr. Ray.
I'm curious if there's been discussions with the neighbors about taking down the chimney and if you've gotten their support in doing that.
I have not had any discussions with the neighbors. You want to chime in?
Please state your name and address for the record.
John Barton, 6138 Turvey Loop. I'm the owner. To the few people that I've talked to, I'm the only one with that issue.
And then to restate the question, have you talked to any of your neighbors in this condo complex to see if they would take issue or if they would be supportive of your removing the chimney?
Our condo association was fine with it. I mean, it was voted unanimously that this was okay to do.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have minutes from that meeting that you could put into the testimony that confirm that?
I certainly can get you that. I don't have it on me, no, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Actually, can I add to that? I believe we sent to Dublin a letter from the association, stating that. So it should be on record.
Could that please be shared with the commission? Can you read it in?
Yes,
It looks like it's short.
absolutely. So it is dated June 29th of this year to the City of Dublin regarding 6138 Turvey Loop West. I, Ed Ostrowski, President of the Board of the Village of Balgriffin Condominium Association, hereby notify the City of Dublin that on June 3rd, 2021, the Board of Trustees voted to approve the proposed removal of the chimney at 6138 Turvey Loop Lane, and it is signed and dated.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? I have just one. So if the commission were to entertain the approval of removing the chimney, can you walk us through what the proposed interior? So we went over the exterior. We went over the saving of the stone to reuse. We went over the patching of the stucco and the matching of the colors and that sort of thing. But with the notation of the sliding glass doors as not being functional and the hump in the great room, can you walk us through what that restoration looks like from a floor joist and internal perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine that the floor joists are probably going to retain some of that hump once the weight's finally moved off of it. So I would imagine that the floor joists will need to be replaced in that area. And then, the new fireplace would be installed, and I assume new doors would probably need to be installed as well.
So can you walk us through the difference between if the chimney were to be repaired, whether that's a shoring up, a sister joist, anything like that, what the interior differences would be versus the exterior differences?
Interior-wise, I mean, there's going to be structural enhancements that need to happen to put in, if we're going to say sister joists, I mean, it might need to be sister beams, steel beams, something that goes back to the next supporting beam to support the weight. We might have to do some structural supports to the existing beam in the basement. And then, if we're taking up space, if the new beams are wide enough that they take up space for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, those items would need to be redone inside to accommodate the need for the new beams.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any final questions from the commission for either staff or the applicant before we enter into deliberation? Mr. Way?
I'm not quite sure who this is for, but because we don't have a visual of what this issue is, I'm just struggling to really understand that somebody built a chimney on floor joists with no foundation underneath it.
I understand that it's cantilevered.
Well, it's got to be, it's got to be resting on something.
Not directly. So cantilever distributes the weight. So do we have someone from staff who can explain this? Otherwise, I will take a swing.
My understanding is that if my arm is the floor joist, and this is the exterior wall of the unit, these floor joists extend beyond the exterior wall, and the chimney is perched on the top of those joists.
I'm just surprised that construction technique would actually have been approved by, that's just, you need to have a foundation under a masonry structure like that. I'm just.
So it's probably not, it's probably lick and stick stone, so face applied stone, not necessarily, right? A lighter weight is.
But we don't know that, right?
Well, we don't know it for certain, but to your point, if it's masonry, yeah, it would not be done that way. So the nature of the construction they're articulating by default tells us kind of what that material that is.
But the other thing is that, wood fails over time. And at some point, that wood's going to fail and not support that chimney anyway. Not just the weight issue that's causing structural problems within the unit. I'm just making that point. But I guess we're just speculating because we don't have a visual detail.
If we could pause for a moment, have you had the opportunity to inspect the item?
I have seen it, yes.
Now, professionally, can you walk us through your trade just so I can, make sure it's recorded on record before I ask the next series of questions?
Okay. In terms of, what do you want me to explain?
Are you a general contractor? Do you have certifications? You're a restoration
I see.
professional, but can you talk us through?
Yeah, I'm a licensed architect.
Okay. So you've had opportunity to inspect the chimney.
I have.
And the construction design of this chimney. Can you talk us through the specifics on the construction of that chimney in the cantilever fashion, the cantilever?
Sure. And she did a good job explaining it. I mean, the floor joists are continuous from the interior, and then they rest on the foundation wall, and then just keep going for maybe, say, 2 feet. And then they built walls on top of the floor joists, and then they stoned it. And it's not uncommon that you would see cantilevered chimneys. What's uncommon is that we have stone attached to them. It is cultured stone, you are correct. So it is the lick and stick stone, but it is a lot heavier than, say, siding or stucco that you would normally see on a cantilevered chimney.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
All right. Any final questions?
One more. If we were to approve it, back to your question, Chairman, about the patching it, the concern about matching materials, could there be a stipulation, or would you be open to a stipulation that in terms of painting the stucco, that it be painted, that the entire wall that's between the two end units so that it's consistent? Or because I don't see any other break where you could do that. Or would you be open to some stipulation that, there's an inspection of the final repair to make sure that it is all matching appropriately? Because again, from a neighbor standpoint, I wouldn't want to have to be looking at a remedy that wasn't done correctly and didn't look right. So I assume we could stipulate that in any kind of approval.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with that. So, I mean, half of his suggestion is 6138, and then it'd just be the adjacent unit over between the two end units. And I should state, whatever happens here, if this chimney is removed and rebuilt, I mean, you're going to have, if it's removed to be rebuilt with a foundation or sister joist, you're going to have new stone, you're going to have stucco patches, you're going to have repainting. So if this chimney is to be repaired, that is inevitable.
Thank you, sir. Looking back to the commission. No final questions? Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Looking then to the commission for discussion. Mr. Wade, you want to start us off?
I guess I go back to the original statement about the visibility of this unit from public streets. It isn't really visible. In fact, it's very much of an internal unit. And it looks like there's probably the 4 units that back to it are really the only units that would look to it. I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have some kind of a letter from each one of those homeowners saying, yes, they would be okay with it. But because it's from the association, I assume they're representing everybody. Because of its location, I don't really have a problem with removing the chimney. I don't think that, again, nobody ever sees this elevation the way it is because you can't get back far enough from it because the units are so close. And you're far enough away from any kind of driveway or parking lot that you're really not going to see that kind of impact. So personally, I'm okay with the removal. I am concerned about the patching and making sure that whatever is done matches, because I think just aesthetically for the community, I think that needs to be consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Next, I'm going to go Mr. Fishman.
I didn't think this would be a tough one, but I guess it is. I understand the homeowner's discontent with having to repair the chimney, but it seems like the standard thing to do would be to repair the chimney, okay? And sistering the joist and doing some type of support should do that. The aesthetics, I was around when this was approved. And one of the things that if you look at the minutes, that they were real concerned about the four-sided architecture. That was a big deal then, and still is. And I think that you take the chimney off, you really have to paint the entire back of the whole building, not just your unit, okay, to make it match, okay? And I don't know, things seem to go downhill when we start tearing chimneys off and we make those kind of alterations. And it's a lovely development. And my first inclination, I maybe could be talked out of it, but would be to repair the chimney. Interestingly, you probably don't want to hear this, I had the same problem with my chimney. And my chimney was a masonry chimney sitting on the ground. And the ground settled and the chimney pulled away from the house. And there was no thought of tearing the chimney off the house. We actually, we had people come out and they didn't touch, mine was real brick. It was a brick chimney, and they actually jacked it up. They dug a hole under the footer of the chimney. They put these jacks in there, they jacked it up, filled it with concrete, and we were done. This one seems like it'd be simpler. All you have to do is assist the joist and put new lumber to cantilever and jack it back up. I don't know. He's the architect, not me, but I just have a little bit of problem, and our architect says he doesn't have a problem, but I have a little bit of problem with just every time something goes bad, we tear it off, and I wonder what, I was on a HOA board for 40 years, and we don't necessarily reflect the views of all the residents. I mean, the people in this building might say, wow, he's tearing a chimney off the back of the building. So my inclination is to agree with staff to fix it, okay, and instead of tear it off. But I can be convinced otherwise by the rest of the board if I have respect for our architect who just gave his opinion, so.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Mr. Supelak.
One, this is an unfortunate problem. Sorry you guys are here sort of trying to relieve it, right? And that's all this comes to. You're trying to relieve an unfortunate problem. I think Mr. Way said it well relative to some of even the conditions I think that are articulated from the city's side. I don't know that I'm so worried about this being seen or not seen, right? So take that one off the table from my vantage point. I think we're already dancing around a few different concerns. One of them is the big concern about matching and patching. One of them is a big concern about how rare is this situation, right? Is it prevalent? Is this the first of many to come? And then the third is to what Mr. Fishman just said and articulated. What assurances do we have that the neighbors are legitimately fine, right? There is, to his point, the board is one thing, but it could be there are direct neighbors who are immediately impacted. That isn't the sort of global neighborhood type of thing. So those three concerns. I will say matching and patching, I imagine we can articulate conditions effectively enough to get us to where we need to go there. As far as how rare is this, it's been 20 years. There are, near as I can tell, 40 units here. This is one of 40 after 20 years worth of slow sag. Speaks to the possibility that there is a bad joist in there, right, already, or that somebody came through and punched too many holes in one, so on and so forth, which is a unique problem to your unit, not to the entire complex. So all that said, that length of duration before we really got to a problem that needs hyper relieved or the count of units, I'm even willing to believe that this is a one-off, that it's not going to be prevalent, that it won't become, whatever solution we come to here, won't become the standard across the entire neighborhood. So which leaves me with just the assurances about the neighbors. And I don't know necessarily how to resolve that one. Obviously, you did the right thing getting, I think, the letter from the group. I don't know if we could also put in stipulations or conditions that might get a letter from adjacent neighbors or neighbors in the building. There's only 4 of them in the building, so it's, it's not that many, and I guess 3 others at that. So I don't know if that might help us get there, but that would be my 3 concerns, and I think how I interpret each of them.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Mr. Schneer.
Well, I agree with Mr. Fishman on one thing. This is a tough one because we do feel it's an unfortunate situation and there's no real easy remedy. In a somewhat semi-perfect world, I guess I would have liked to have seen, because this is an economic issue, I would have liked to have seen cost estimates for option A versus option B, with option A being what's proposed and option B being some other methodology, the scissoring or whatever. That would at least let us at least weigh the economic hardship against the aesthetics, et cetera. But that's not apparently the case. The other is, as my fellow commissioners have indicated, the greatest impact is to the immediate neighbors. It would, I don't know if we, just thinking aloud, if we would want to make that a condition, but I agree that an HOA doesn't represent specifically those that are the closest to being impacted. Like Mr. Fishman, I can be persuaded. What I would have liked to have seen is table and come back with estimates and letters from the your adjacent neighbors would be the direction I would go.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. So I'll close us out with some comments this evening. I've been in your position. It's not a fun place to be. Just down the road from us, I used to own one of the condos at Crowell Village. And Crowell Village came before us, before I was part of us. And it was your situation to the extreme. It was all of the chimneys, all of the backside, no weatherproofing, redo all the stone, redo all the roofs. It ended up being about a $4 million issue. And we sat in those chairs and we asked, because it was a financial issue, and the city planning and zoning and the city council said, we're really sorry, we feel for you, but we have standards in Dublin that we uphold. And if we make an exception for one, we have to make an exception for the next one, and we have to make an exception for the next one. And it was really hard to hear that, because I knew that I was going to be signing that check every month for the length of when I owned that condo. And I wish it would have been different, but those condos look great now. They look great. They have new material that is 30-year material, and the HOA fee is very, very large because it ended up being an HOA issue, not an individual owner issue. But it looks great, and it has 30 more years of life in it. And so, I pulled up some of the planning recommendations and the documentation there, and you'll hear people talk about precedent because, this is, Mr. Supalack estimated 40 units, and there was a comment that it affected the 3 neighbors closest. I would argue it actually affects the next set of buildings more than it affects the buildings in the same larger building, because they're not looking at it. They're not looking at the next door neighbors. They're looking at the units just behind. I think it is a very unfortunate situation, and just like Mr. Supalack said, 1 in 20 years, it looks like maybe it was a bad joist, a bad soil compaction rate, something that was very unfortunate, and I sincerely feel for you. With that said, I think that there are options here. And I think that there are I've been in city government for, 10 years or so in one capacity or another. And So I'm not professional, I'm not a trained architect, nor am I some of these other qualifications. However, you know, helical piers going in underneath the cantilevered floor joists that would allow for a true foundation to be built under there. Something that allows the weight distribution. Unfortunately, like you mentioned before, those floor joists are probably going to need to be shored up regardless. So there's going to be opening up of the floor or opening up of the basement ceiling to shore that up. Really what we're talking about is the backside of the building. Does the chimney stay or go? Is it the work to patch where a chimney used to be, or is it the work to restore a chimney to something that's functional? And while I appreciate that this one is not as visible, we're not guaranteed that it's not going to be visible in the future. So if redevelopment happens, and now this is the exterior of the development, we have a building with a chimney that doesn't exist, that doesn't match the rest of the development. We don't have crystal balls and we can't foresee what's going to happen in the future, but we see planning and zoning commissions prior to us, we see city council prior to us, we see staff prior to us, and tonight with a recommendation that holds Dublin to the standard that we have historically and continue to hold Dublin Building Code to. So with that being said, I would not be in support of the recommendation as it stands tonight. Turning then back to the commission. Prior to doing that, have we received any public comment during the course of the meeting?
No public comment.
All right. Looking then to the applicant, you heard differing opinions this evening. There was one mention of if there's a request to table this item and bring it back with the support of neighbors. You heard a couple of the voices up here who would entertain that. So I'd like to give you the option if you'd like to request that the commission table this item, or if you would like us to proceed with a vote this evening.
That depends how persuaded they've been. Let me check.
And just to inform that discussion a bit more, I would point out that we are too short of our number tonight, and it takes a vote of 4 members to adopt a motion. So it would have to be a 4-to-1 vote to pass tonight, whereas if we had 7, our full complement of members, there might be differences of opinion.
Did you guys catch all that?
Sadly, I think so. We need 4.
You need 4
and
to.
we're missing 2 tonight.
Yeah, I see that. So, okay. I would suggest we table and possibly come back. So I did the drawings for some of that Crawwell Village chimney stuff. Whole level of different architecture than these, though. I will say that. I don't know if you guys have seen the picture of the building behind that would be looking at it. It's a bad picture. I can't see if you can see it, but it's a 2-story wall, flat as can be, and no chimneys. So, and it's part of the same, I believe, part of the same development. It's in the same shaded area. So, but I think it sounds like our best bet today is to table this, come back with some cost estimates, maybe some descriptions of what needs to happen in order to do options such as sistering. I still think the chimney needs to come down regardless, which means finishes will need patched regardless. I mean, it doesn't mean we don't build it back. If it comes down and you guys say it has to come back, it'd be built back, but you're still patching materials, matching existing, all that stuff. But I think we're tearing decks down and all kinds of stuff to make it happen.
Okay, thank you, sir. So if I heard you correctly, the request is to table this evening?
That is correct.
Okay, Mr. Schneer.
Could I also suggest perhaps some pictures that shows the level of damage?
Possibly. I mean, it's tough to see the hump in the floor from a photo. I mean, you feel it when you walk on it. But yeah, it's tough to see the damage because it's such a different kind of damage.
Even the casing at the sliding glass door, that may be because of the perspective. That may be a better way if we can see the minor hump in the sliding glass door.
Okay.
Yeah, I can get you pictures on how everything's folding this way and the cracks in the doors. I mean, I can't get them closed. So that's the big issue. You cannot see the chimney, though, from a street. It's in a back where there's a courtyard. So the chimney is not visible from any street. So.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fishman, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think it's been our practice in the past not to really vote on something based on economics. If it costs more to repair it, so be it, because, as I said, our concern is meeting the standards and of Dublin. I just want to comment, are you the original owner of the property?
I'm not. I'm the second owner.
Oh, too bad. Okay. When I dealt with my chimney, if you're the first owner, then you can go back on the builder if it was a defect.
Yeah, he's bankrupt.
Yeah. Can't get any worse, can it?
I feel your pain.
I feel your pain. And after listening to my colleagues, I kind of agree with Ms. Hall. I think we don't want to set a precedent, and I think that repairing it's probably the right thing to do rather than tearing it down. I think that's kind of the Dublin way, and I'd worry about precedent, and also I'd worry about the feeling of the neighbors. So anyway, thank you.
All right.
And Madam Chair, if I could just
Yes, sir.
correct a statement that I made. I was thinking of our rules for council, which does require a majority of the full membership. Indeed, a motion can pass here with a majority of the quorum. So three
Understood.
would
So
do
it
it.
would be 3 votes tonight is what you would need.
Yeah. I think we're safe to table it for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will entertain a motion then at the,
I just want to enter a comment into the record for, Mr. Fishman referred to me as an architect. I am not an architect. I don't want the AIA coming after me. I'm a landscape architect. So just for the record.
Sorry. I almost mentioned it when I said other qualifications, but I didn't want to nail myself down if I was remembering incorrectly.
I respect his opinion anyway.
All right. Closing up the discussion on this item, I will entertain a motion to table this item at the applicant's request.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Way,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Mr. Schneer,
Yes.
Ms. Call.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure having you. Hopefully, everything just goes better and better all the time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we are on to our Baltimore Corner restaurant. So it now has a name. Welcome, Valentina's. Located at 4595 Bridge Park Avenue, 21-017 MPR Minor Project Review. This application is a request for exterior and site modifications to accommodate a restaurant tenant, including storefront alterations, an enclosed patio addition, a covered patio space, and associated design details located within Bridge Park, Block B, zoned Bridge Street District, Scioto River Neighborhood District. The site is southeast of the intersection of Bridge Park Avenue and Riverside Drive. Ms. Martin, welcome, and I understand you have our case presentation this evening.
Yes, good evening. As mentioned, this is a request for review and approval of a minor project review. The site is located within the Bridge Street District, specifically the Bridge Park development, and is highlighted here in yellow. The building, the Baltimore Building B2, is located at the intersection of Bridge Park Avenue and Riverside Drive. The star indicates the location of the tenant space. You'll notice here it's adjacent to Riverside Crossing Park, as well as the terminus of the Dublin Link pedestrian bridge. Staff has provided a number of context photos for the Commission's consideration to understand the scope and location of the building as it relates to the broader vicinity. The building is on the right-hand side of the screen. Additionally, a number of context photos of the existing conditions of the structure are also provided tonight. You'll see the north elevation, the northwest corner at the intersection of Riverside Drive, as well as Bridge Park Avenue. And then you'll also see the west elevation and the detail of the Pocket Plaza, which will be modified with this request. So a bit of development history that the commission may recall. This development was originally approved in 2015. At the time, the developer was required to designate a shopping corridor. Shopping corridors are intended to be uninterrupted pedestrian ways that allow for the activation of the public realm for outdoor seating and dining. The shopping corridor comes with an additional requirement that 12 feet of width be provided. Additionally, the Pocket Plaza located adjacent to this tenant space was also approved as part of the open space plan. And at the time, there was a condition of approval that was detailed in your staff report that the developer work with the city and the Dublin Arts Council to finalize elements in that Pocket Plaza. The tenant modifications this evening are triggering compliance with that condition, as well as considerations of the details, not only within the public realm, but also on private property, as shown in the screen. So a bit of case history. As the commission may recall, this has been before you twice before at the recommendation of the administrative review team. The commission has made a number of comments which the applicant has addressed, including enhancing and elevating the design to create a sense of place. So you'll see the updates between June and August on your screen, being reviewed here on the second day of September. So the applicant has retained the Pocket Plaza. You'll notice that the addition is no longer encroaching to the same extent that it was previously. With that, the column and the vertical expression of the building from grade to the upper stories is also retained. The applicant has incorporated a number of the inspiration images that the commission previously identified, including Parisian cafe-style awnings, furnishings, and lighting. Additionally, you'll note at the corner a 3-tiered fountain is proposed, located within the City of Dublin right-of-way. The design is augmented with a mixture of artificial as well as living vegetation. And all of this together really reinforces that gateway design. So I'm going to go through a number of elements on the site plan and then further detail them with the elevations. So highlighted in light blue is the primary entrance to the tenant space that is located along Bridge Park Avenue. Highlighted in green is the Pocket Plaza. Highlighted in orange is the proposed fountain. Highlighted in red is the enclosed patio space. And highlighted in pink is the covered patio space. The right-of-way line here is denoted in a dashed royal blue line. And so here in yellow and teal, you'll see the proposed 6-foot right-of-way encroachment, as well as the modifications to the existing streetscape planters to reduce the width of those by approximately 2 feet, allowing a total clear area of approximately 8 feet in width, where 12 is required. Staff is recommending approval of a waiver to permit a reduced sidewalk width in this area, as doing so would achieve the goals of the Bridge Street District by allowing for additional opportunities for outdoor seating and dining that engage the pedestrian realm. So here are photos of the existing conditions of the site. At the request of the commission, the engineering technician and planning technician with the City of Dublin visited the site this morning and taped out the blue line, which is the right-of-way line. You can see it best up against the building. The yellow line is the proposed new face of building. And then the orange square is the portion of the fountain that is located within the public right-of-way. And you'll notice on the right-hand photo, there are a number of flags appearing in the planter bed. Those flags are intended to indicate the modification to that planter area. So you'll see a reduced pedestrian area that's also increased by those modifications to the streetscape. Additionally, detailing.
Excuse the interruption, Nikki. Can you go back one image? On the left image there, in the planter, that what appears to be a red line, is that a continuation of the flags to indicate where the new walk path would be?
Yeah, so the red line is the beginning of that.
Okay, thank you. Again, excuse the interruption.
Yeah, no worries. That's a great question. Okay, so in detail, the Plaza and Fountain is located in this proposed orange area, partially along private property and mostly within the right-of-way. Planning, parks, engineering, and police are recommending that the fountain be eliminated with this design. The conceptual design is provided on the screen and is approximately 4 feet in diameter and 7 feet in height. In review of this element, it does further constrain the pedestrian realm within the public right-of-way and is visually incongruent with the established streetscape character as well as the base building. So the applicant has provided a number of character images which fully detail the proposed restaurant. So the entry located along Bridge Park Avenue is highlighted by a proposed canopy structure. The canopy is black in color and will be grounded with planter boxes with a gold accent. The entry incorporates additional storefront windows as well as a revolving door. Interior to the canopy, there are marquee lights as well as the additional layer of detail to incorporate coach lights as well as an awning valance. The awning valance design is carried across the extent of the storefront facade. So at the intersection of Riverside Drive and Bridge Park Avenue, the applicant is proposing to activate the Pocket Plaza. This Pocket Plaza would still be publicly accessible, although would be amenitized for customers of the restaurant. So the applicant is proposing to further define the space with landscaping and lighting, as well as to highlight the portion of the enclosed patio space with a partial awning as well as operable windows. You'll see in this rendering the fountain and seat wall is located at the intersection, as well as planters hanging from the underside of the base building. Staff is conditioning that the planters hanging from the underside of the building are eliminated, and the applicant continue to work with staff and the Dublin Arts Council to implement a piece of public art. Public art was previously required in 2015 and is one of the elements similar to a fountain that can be used to fulfill the gateway and terminal vista requirements in the code, while still allowing sufficient pedestrian circulation area. Here's another character image of the Pocket Plaza. You'll see here a variety of movable seating and chairs, as well as those intimate gathering spaces. So as we look at the west elevation of the restaurant, there are both enclosed patios further to the north, as well as a covered patio to the south. All of the portions of the patio have operable windows in order to blur the line between the public and private realm. The awnings are continuous and accent each portion of the building. The awning also is complemented by artificial vegetation, which is being conditioned by staff to be removed. That is located above the awning and is intended to be placed year-round. Staff has expressed concerns regarding potential bird habitats as well as advanced aging of the artificial plant material and awnings due to those locations. So with this application, as the Commission would expect, a variety of furniture selections are also provided. The applicant is proposing a mix of seating as well as table types. A total of 5 light fixtures are proposed. Staff is conditioning that the applicant provide a photometric plan with their building permit. The intent here is to confirm that the site is compliant with code and still allows for the layering and dimensionality of light fixtures. Additionally, the applicant has indicated proposed landscape materials, which include a variety of movable plants as well as hanging plants and a gelato cart. Staff is recommending that the opportunity for all of these moving elements, with the exception of hanging plants, be retained, and staff is supportive of the gelato cart as a potential placemaking element. So in review of the waiver, staff is recommending approval of a waiver, although with the exclusion of the fountain and seawall. In review of the minor project review, staff is recommending approval with 9 conditions. These conditions are as detailed in the presentation as well as the staff report. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, our applicant team is here as well tonight. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question to the commission first. With this particular application, a lot of our questions historically have kind of blurred the line between are they questions for staff or are they questions for the applicant. So with the commission's acceptance and approval, I'd like to offer the applicant time to do a presentation and then handle questions for both staff and applicant at the same time. Seeing nods, welcome. Please state your name and address for the record, and then do you have a presentation for us this evening?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Randy Roberti with Design Collective, 151 Nationwide Boulevard in Columbus. Appreciate you having us here tonight. Nikki, thanks for the introduction. Would you be able to pull up the PDF presentation I had submitted to you guys? So as we started looking at this and taking a new approach to it, we re-listened to the last 2 commission meetings and your input on the design. And there were a couple key takeaways we had from that. One, the encroachment into the right-of-way wasn't necessarily a deal breaker. You guys may support that, but you felt it was too permanent. It felt too intrusive and didn't really engage the sidewalk and the pedestrians in the way you would like it to. More we heard French cafe or more engaging. So that was one of the issues. The other was the verticality of that existing tower and column. You felt it was the gateway to Bridge Park as it was designed, and maintaining that that feature and that use was important. So, you know, and then thirdly, the pocket park was very contentious. What is the pocket park? What does that mean? It was originally designed with intention. It even has some irregular paver patterns in there that that were meant to inform or influence some future development of the space. So, you know, as we started looking at those 3 core ideas, you know, the first thing that jumped out at us is there's really a competing idea of the gateway. The tower feature works great as a gateway from a vehicular scale, from the bridge, and from across the river. So it's a larger scale. But from a pedestrian scale on the sidewalk, it doesn't necessarily function that way. It's too large to really engage the pedestrians as they're circulating by. So how do we create a space that achieves the gateway at human scale? So that was really the goal here, is to create that human scale engagement with the surrounding people that makes them aware that they have arrived at Bridge Park. It is the gateway into the development. As well as creating an eye-popping feature that as you're driving by or coming across the new bridge, that it really stands out. Nikki, can you start on the site plan up at the beginning, if you don't mind? One back, please. There we go. So if you can see up at the screen, I have a laser pointer, but I realize you're all looking in front of you at your own screen, so technology gets me. But so a couple things. The key thing is we're encroaching on the sidewalk along Riverside, and we're proposing the modification to the planter. We've tapered that all the way back to the corner on the far right of the screen. all the way up to the intersection. So that taper really achieves a form of camouflage, if you will. You don't really notice that you're modifying that planter. We've studied it in 3D. As you can see, we have a pretty in-depth model of the site and in the context. And it's not even noticeable when you modify that. Just for the record, the tree on the corner in this planter that we're modifying is dead currently and flagged for removal. So the vegetation in those planters are going to be torn up anyway as that is removed and replaced. So we have a head start on that work, if you will. You know, at looking and analyzing the existing site, there are these existing curved, they're sidewalk features, and they turn into the planting beds at a higher elevation. And they frame the intersection. And what we found interesting about that, and what influenced the fountain itself, was it is dead center on those two round circles. So we integrated that in a way that became very intentional, almost like it was purposeful in the original design of the building in the site, so that those round curves reflect and mirror that fountain. The fountain itself is a seat ledge, so it's actually a bench for pedestrians to touch down on. There was mention in previous sessions that maybe that's where you meet before grabbing a cup of coffee with a friend before you walk down the Sweetwater or go jogging. And that's the touchdown point. I'll meet you at the fountain on the corner. We can touch base there and do whatever we're going to do. So that was the goal there, the attention-grabbing feature. And just for the records, regarding the public safety, we did a quick square footage calculations, up around 1,000 square foot of open area in that area, which broken down by building code would equate to 200 occupants in a square foot per person breakdown, which is quite a few people on that intersection, just for the record. As we continued to look at this, you know, the fact that this was looking too permanent. How do we achieve that? Nikki, can you switch to the next sheet for me? So we're encroaching down in, but we wanted it to look less permanent. So we integrated a series of awnings, which feel like a tacked on after the fact feature in a good way. They're more eclectic. They are a traditional feature that's added that extend over right-of-ways in buildings. And we extend some posts down, and there's some solid operable sliding window systems under those awnings. So they read as temporary awnings, but they have an operable feel. So what we did is extend that down, and we didn't want to encroach on the architecture, so we kept it below the level of that roof, and we wrapped it around the corner and back to the building, which you'll see here when we get to the 3D here momentarily. On the ground in the pocket park is an existing irregular paver pattern. It's a burgundy, red, brown brick everywhere out here on the sidewalks. But in here, you can kind of loosely see it on here. It's this multiple curves forming a regular shape around the column, and it's a light gray. So there was obviously intent with that originally. So our thought was to take that and have it influence our design of the pocket park. The railings, the furniture groups, they start to follow that pattern, creating some niches and carve-ins around the pocket park, right? There's some seating group that could play off of the bar, indoor, outdoor. But at the same time, it creates a niche for a bench and a little seating group and public interaction at the same time. So it's achieving multiple things with the configuration. Same with the bench. It's a seat bench, but it also provides ambiance to the intersection. If I'm standing here on the middle of the harsh intersection, you know, you get some running water or a little feature to make you feel a little better as well. So, you know, that was the goal, to work with the existing conditions without disrupting the context. Nikki, can you switch to the next one? Go one more for me. All right, so as you can see here, the awning, we wrapped it underneath the existing feature, which was allowed it to be sensitive to the design of that feature and really does not disrupt it at all. The negative about this feature, while it works great from a building standpoint, when you're out under this in the pocket plaza, it's kind of harsh above your head, right? It's a large, flat, shiny, light gray plane. That's not necessarily the most comforting or engaging element to have floating above you when you're in a restaurant or when you're in a plaza. So how do we bring some warmth to it and some interest? So we integrated some vegetation. this whole intersection out here, while the park's going to do wonders and help a little bit, this side of the street, there's not a lot of greenery. There's the planting beds, but other than that, there isn't. This Pocket Plaza was called out as, per the exhibit Nikki showed earlier, as green space calculation, but integrating a public art or integrating any of these other features that have been discussed for a public plaza do not satisfy green space. A sculpture isn't green space. So we took that literally and integrated the green space itself. And just a quick clarification as well, in the code definition, in your zoning code for fountains, or for public plazas, excuse me, it says public plaza shall contain public art or fountains. So just a quick verbiage clarifications, they are directly written into the code. So that was the overall goal, and the way we tried to achieve the, this really the conditions and the address the issues you guys raised. So I guess with that brief overview, I'll turn it over to you guys for questions.
Thank you. Looking to the commission, questions for the applicant or for staff? Mr. Wade, you want to start us off?
I'm going to start off with staff. And again, I'm trying to learn about pocket plazas. And I just want to understand the intent of the pocket plaza. Is it supposed to be public or private?
So in the zoning code, it is intended to be publicly accessible. So it is intended to be on private property, but accessible to the public.
Thank you. Can we pull up the plan? Or I guess I can look what here. So the other question I have, and I don't know who can answer this, is about the building line along Bridge Park Avenue was set back for its entire length from the right-of-way. And I don't know if how did that occur? Was that just because that's the way that it was, somebody wanted it designed? I mean, theoretically, the building could have gone out to the blue line, right?
So each building type in the Bridge Street District has a required build zone. This is a corridor building type, and I believe the build zone is 0 to 20 feet. So it could have.
Right. But the pocket plaza is a no-build zone, right? So it being set back, that you couldn't build the building out at that location. It has to be some kind of an open space by the definition.
The Pocket Plaza is it's within the right-of-way, or it's within the building lot.
Yeah, that's where
You could make that building if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. It was designed as Pocket Plaza, but the right-of-way goes all the way out to the corner of the lot.
That's what I'm asking the question, but you can't because it's designated as a pocket plaza.
It could have been building per the site extents.
In 2015, but today it could not be.
Right. So is the pocket plaza, if it's on private property, is it part of the tenant space or is it part of the development space?
Do you mind if I field that one, Nikki, or go ahead?
I mean, I think that is, a fundamental question, but the short answer is that it was required to be provided with the development and is not technically required to be provided with the tenant space. This tenant has elected to influence the public plaza through their design, triggering review of that area.
Right, but what I'm getting at is there's the developer is leasing space. Is the pocket plaza a leasable space? And does the tenant then have the ability to capture that as leasable space?
I'm not able to answer questions regarding.
I don't necessarily know the specifics of the deal, but the Pocket Plaza is being presented to the tenant to fit out as part of this, occupancy. So if that answers your question.
Well, so the way that you've gone with the design of the space is, to me, it looks like a tenant space, that you're basically using it as an outdoor dining patio.
Partially. So as we looked at that, you're not wrong. The issue is, this Pocket Plaza, this location or plot of space, it's tucked up in the armpit of the building, if you will. It's a very odd public space. So imagine yourself trying to gather under this building, tucked away right up against the window to a restaurant. It's not a place where a lot of people would really gather naturally based on that existing constraint and condition. So the goal was to provide some of it as restaurant space so that the restaurant spills out and engages the sidewalk, which was a big goal of Bridge Park. But at the same time, carve in these niches and benches and seating areas that can be utilized by the public. So it becomes a half and half type of feature where public can come up and use it, but also it's not just dead space that's empty all the time, because if it's public park, let's face it, it's not going to be occupied 24/7 with quite a few people.
So the other cue to the, is it public or private, is that you've got windows that open up so that basically the restaurant could be open to that space.
Yes.
The point I'm trying to make is that if the restaurant is using it as tenant space and using it to take care of customers, how comfortable does the public feel coming into that space if they feel like there's customers sitting out there at tables and they go, oh, I think that defeats the whole purpose of the pocket park, which is to create something that's very inviting to the public to come and use at a key gateway corner in Bridge Park. This is the 100% corner in Bridge Park. And to me, and because of its relationship to the bridge, pedestrian bridge, and the amount of people flowing back and forth, that it can't be one or the other. It's either got to be a public space or it needs to be a private space.
So
I would argue that it needs to be a public space.
So our fear with making it entirely public space is that it creates a void or a dead space right on that intersection. So the vast majority of the time when people are circulating by, it's empty, especially when the park across of Riverside opens. If you're out going to enjoy public space, you're likely going to go over to the new park. That's a little more usable and in a less awkward situation. So in an attempt to create continuous energy on that intersection that you're looking for at Bridge Park, utilizing it in a way that's sustainable seemed more appropriate. That was our goal.
And again, it's, if the design is right, it won't be a dead space. So I think it's just how do you design it so that it becomes inviting enough for the public that they want to come out there and see it as a gathering place. I'm going to shift my questioning first. The indoor-outdoor room, is that permanent or temporary?
Which portion? The one south of the bar?
That piece.
That is a permanent structure.
So you're permanently...
steel column with Pella sliding windows, but it has an awning that disguises it or camouflages it, if you will.
And it has are you building it up? You're building a...
There'll be a 30-inch high planter that corresponds to the height of tabletops, and then the glazing's above that.
How far is the floor of that space above the sidewalk?
It's level with the sidewalk.
It's level with the sidewalk. Okay.
Yes.
It looked like there was some kind of an edge there, but that's okay.
No, the finished floor and sidewalk elevation are basically equivalent.
Yeah, with the planters there, I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to pause there, and I just want to warn you, I'm going to have more questions.
I want to offer a little bit of text from our Bridge Street District Code. Placemaking elements. So this is, I don't know, I'll give you the reference, but it's 5.1 on page 63 of the Bridge Street District Code. The intent for designated shopping corridors in the BSD neighborhood districts is to provide continuous, mixed-use street frontages with retail uses and eating and drinking facilities occupying the ground floor of buildings located on streets that have well-defined and detailed pedestrian route. Buildings with frontage on designated shopping corridors should be sited to accommodate a mix of outdoor activities such as patios, seating areas, pocket plazas, and spacious walkways. Later in the code, it repeats that almost verbatim in shopping corridor. And then in pocket plazas, a pocket plaza is designed as a well-defined area of refuge separate from the public sidewalk. These areas contain a greater amount of impervious coverage than other open space types. Seating areas are required and special features such as fountains and public arts installations are encouraged. So just for discussion purposes this evening, wanted to make sure that we were referencing what was adopted. Looking back.
Page 76 of the printed code I have.
That's the one that I just
What
read.
you were reading about parking plazas is different than it states in here. You want me to, I could read that, or?
Sure.
Maybe I didn't. It says pocket plazas are intended to provide a form open space of relatively small scale. Is it?
I picked up at
sorry.
the Pocket Plaza in that same paragraph.
Gotcha. You were right. Summary.
Yep. Mr. Schneer.
I had a couple questions, comments. Picking up on Mr. Way's comments, sort of the public-private, turning that around, maybe it's a rhetorical question, maybe it's hypothetical. What if the public sat down at one of those three tables? Would the, it'd be, would they be comfortable in doing so? And if they did, would the restaurant say, gee, that's for diners? Mm-hmm. Because I'm making the flip side of the point, which is your intent would be to use that space for your diners. It's in the public, it's in the plaza. It's whether, on one hand, the public may not feel like they want to go there. On the other hand, the public may want to go there and you may not want them there. How do you deal with that, I guess?
I think it's a mix. I think, the intent was that there would be some of both. We do a lot of development like this, most recently the new Central Block at Easton. And we've found throughout all of our work on developments that in order to achieve placemaking or to create an engaging experience, you have to have a mix of dining and seating for tenants as well as public space. They have to engage and integrate together, 50-50. If you do not, the public spaces feel dead. There's no energy to drive them. What makes you go to that park? It's not a destination, let's face it. The armpit of the building. Why would you ever go there to sit on your own? So you need something to drive you there to create the energy. And that's what we found on spaces like this. When they end up being just park, they sit dead 90% of the time, and it looks like a void or a dead space. So that's what we've struggled with. So the goal was to achieve both of what you just described. Part public, part restaurant, so that the two merge together and blend.
Thank you. And I shift for just a moment. The fountain.
Yep.
Is it something that you're proposing in response to what you perceive this commission wants? Because now the staff is recommending.
Yeah. We had a lot of discussions on that. The fountain, at the previous meetings, I think there was feedback that we weren't achieving the public art, the fountain, that feature of the public plaza. So the fountain was an attempt to appease that issue. And if it's something we have to give to move forward, we aren't opposed to that, just so everyone's aware of that. We would be willing to discuss that.
Thank you.
One follow-up item, Mr. Schneer, also from the code, the seating areas. Outdoor seating areas are required for all pocket plazas and may be required by the reviewing body for other public and private, but specifically called out seating areas are required for pocket plazas, which are interpreted as publicly accessible.
So the question is, there are some seating areas not outside of those tables, if I understand this correctly, which might look more conducive to the public.
Yeah.
So it doesn't say that, the code doesn't say that all the seating areas in the plaza have to be public, right?
That is correct.
So they would be in compliance with the letter.
That was our interpretation, correct.
All right, looking to the commission for other questions, both for staff and the applicant at this point. Mr. Supalack, I see you kind of mulling.
How about this? Relative to combining staff and applicant sort of questions, do we think we're also just jumping into comments, or?
I don't think we're
holding
going to deliberate. I think we'll draw a line after questions are answered. We can, if we find that we have some questions after questions have closed, then we'll entertain those. But I think we want to delineate the questions from the deliberation.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I have a lot more, I think, comments than I do questions. I guess I'm going, and maybe this is just an open question to staff or applicant, whoever feels inclined, I suppose, to answer it. I'm going to the sidewalk and the 2'4", getting us to, I think, 8'2" or 8'7", it looks like, on the sidewalk. How do we get there? Do we feel good about that as creating a generous enough throat through all that? Through that sidewalk on the what is it, the west side?
Yeah, so from a city perspective, the minimum required sidewalk width in all of the Bridge Street district is 8 feet in width. So that is something that the city engineer has deemed that they have a level of comfort with. The reason that this is an item for consideration by the commission is that since this was designated as a shopping corridor, it has additional requirements on top of that.
Additional requirements meaning?
Meaning 12 feet is required in this area versus 8. And so the applicant is requesting 8, which is the need for the waiver. Staff is recommending approval of that waiver because ultimately it does further the goals and objectives of the Bridge Street district at this key location. And, you know, with every stride, there can also be a trade-off. And so that, in this case, is the sidewalk width, but just recognizing that this is such a pivotal location for us to activate, it seems appropriate.
I guess I'm going to 8 feet is generous in most situations. I guess it's just a matter of contextually when you look one side or another, or you're wandering around this district, all of a sudden that potentially feels like a pinch point, and that pinch point feels then like a barrier. And it also has its other, actually, this might be a perfect question for you, just segue back to you, Kim. I guess I'm going to, on the flip side, there's the other side of the coin. At what point do we press that bed too small, and now I feel like I'm on top of the road? So I don't know the answer. I guess I'm just concerned and trying to lay the groundwork to make sure we're considering it well, and it sounds like we are, so that's promising.
I mentioned something real quickly about that. The planting bed along Bridge Park is only 8 feet wide. This one down here will be 11 feet after we remove the portion. So it is wider, more of a barrier than the one that's on the opposite side of the intersection.
But it's also a far faster thoroughfare, right?
Yeah, I understood. I just wanted to point that out.
Bottom line is, to me, it feels like the right sensitivity is in place to sort of consider all that, which is promising.
Mr. Way.
Can you pull up the rendering of the corner? I just wanted to ask the question. There was this reference to plastic plants. I don't know, can you tell us, in the rendering, which plants are real and which plants are plastic?
Absolutely. Basically everything, the hanging planters would be real. And all the vegetation down at ground level would be real that's accessible. The faux vegetation would be along the top of the awning to soften that connection to the existing building. It's not within touchable proximity to the guests, so it would be less, it would not be noticeable from that standpoint.
So in the winter, all of those plants would be gone, right? They would be...
Potentially, we would specify a vine that's an evergreen. Something that stays green in the winter.
Because all of the plants that you're showing are herbaceous plants that are seasonal and would all be, they would die off in the winter, it looks like to me. But it's a rendering, so,
Yeah.
and you don't have a planting plan, so I can't.
They don't age in the rendering, right?
Yeah.
Cameron Mitchell does seasonal does seasonal vegetation, and all the planters themselves, right? That which would be expected. They do fall, summer, spring. The key elements would be specified in a manner that they would be there. So in an appropriate species that they wouldn't look out of place.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff or the applicant? Thank you. All right, at this time, I will look to the commission for discussion. And Mr. Schneier, I think I'm going to start your way if you're amenable to that.
Now that Mr. Way brought it up, I'm fixated on the public-private seating. And I can't pull it up as quickly as you just did. But reading the construction, I'm not certain now that not all the seating that the seating must be public, which would indicate that you may not be able to have restaurant seating there at all. There is a square footage, which we don't have that. We don't have that calculation, I don't believe.
For clarification, we are looking at the Bridge Street District Code. This is seating area, section C. And for the record, I'll read in kind of the pertinent area. Outdoor seating areas are required for all pocket plazas and may be required by the required reviewing body and other public outdoor spaces, including all other open spaces provided in section referenced code. Where required, there shall be a minimum of 1 linear feet of seating for every 2 linear feet of public or private street frontage. The required reviewing body may modify this requirement where conditions warrant greater or lesser seating. Seating requirements may be met through the use of movable seating, fixed individual seating, fixed benches, seat walls, planter ledges, seating steps, and other creatively designed seating areas that invite resting and gathering. A combination of seating is encouraged. To ensure that adequate seating invites use by the public, a portion of the required seating must be located within 10 feet of a public sidewalk where provided.
So I appreciate the energy, the interaction, and trying to blur the lines because it is inviting. The problem is when those lines get too blurred, then the private doesn't know the public and the public doesn't know the private. So, the avenue in Grandview, it's pretty obvious that this is outdoor seating, and then it's pretty obvious that there's a sidewalk. Now, I'm sure Grandview, I'm guessing that there's no public plaza sort of thing there, but it's delineated. You can't go there. Yet you sort of feel like you're a part of it, even though there's some ornamental, iron railing with something. You being the public feels, vice versa. So I would say I'm troubled by those tables, and how you accommodate that. I'm not certain. With respect, just briefly, I'm generally okay with everything else. I sort of like the fountain, but I can go either way with respect to the fountain.
Thank you, Mr. Schneier. Mr. Fishman.
Yeah, I'm also troubled about public and private seating. I really hate to give up the public seating, but I think it will disappear. We have one example in Dublin, and I don't think anybody here is old enough to remember it, but I think it's Oscar's, that their patio is actually public seating. And for years, there was a little sign on the fence that said, public invited or something like that, and that sign fell off many years ago, and nobody would feel comfortable. I remember when they were in front of this board, they said, oh, the teachers can come down from Indian Run and have their lunch there. It's because I think the city owns the property. And it didn't work, okay? People are too shy to go in there and sit, and they're serving food. And if you go there today, you'd never go in there and just sit down with your own lunch and have something at the table. And I think that's the problem. And I hate to give up that public space because it is public space. And that place, I said a few meetings ago, when people come off that bridge, I was down there on a Saturday, it was jammed. And people were standing in the street taking pictures, okay? Before you expanded the restaurant there, they're doing that. And so I really have a problem with that. And I just think that the public-private seating isn't going to work. And an example of that, to this day, we've blocked off the street in Bridge Street for the seating, the pad, the outside pad, the whole street's covered. That's a public street, but you would feel very uncomfortable sitting in there. In fact, I had some people with me, and they had packaged everything, and we took a stop there, and the girl said, "Excuse me, that's for this restaurant," and so it's on a public street. So I have a real problem with that. I think that the pocket parks are valuable. I think that we want to get people coming off the bridge. That's where people sit and meet and so on. I think the restaurant's beautiful. I don't have any problem with anything else, but I don't think it'll work that way.
May I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
How do you envision that pocket park being used from a public standpoint?
I think that
what would be who would go there? Can you talk me through that?
I think as you come off the bridge, I already have met people right there as they came off the bridge, and if there were seats there, it'd be wonderful because people want to sit and talk and so on, not necessarily go to the restaurant. You see, and so I think that was the purpose of it when we zoned it all these years ago, and that's my problem. I just think it's confusing for people, and I think the restaurant will dominate the space.
Yeah, I think what you described.
And I appreciate the discussion. We like to
We're supposed to be discussing,
deliberate.
Sorry. Yeah, yes. Okay, so we're deliberating. My feeling is that when you have a restaurant and the public sharing the same space without a delineation, I think it's going to be a problem. Okay, that's in a nutshell.
Understood. I'd like to go back here and just make sure that we're not focusing only on the items. We're looking at the entire application today. So we're looking at lighting packages. We're looking at the plants, the faux plants versus the real plants. And then Mr. Schneer, you touched on the fountain. Did either of you want to add two comments?
I'm not big on faux plants because they're usually very hard to maintain. And if you go to other areas of town where they have them, they're usually crushed and wrecked and so on. So I think that can be a problem. I think they have to have plants that stay green throughout the year, evergreens and so on, or something like that. I think those can be regularly maintained by a gardener or somebody to do that. So
I can't get overly exercised about the real versus faux plants. We have our standards. Presumably the applicant isn't going to want to see faux plants strewn all over the sidewalk and the plastic things and such. Well, to state my opinion, I would not be adverse to permitting the faux plants.
And then one final item that I've seen as a discussion point in previous is the sidewalk width. They're asking for a waiver of the reduced sidewalk width.
And I'm fine with the reduction. I think that is it's a good trade-off to get public and private energy sort of mixing together.
I'm not crazy about it, but if the rest of the feels it's not a huge thing in my life. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. All right, Mr. Way, let's go. Yes, okay. Yes. Mr. Supelak's gonna be after you, and then I'll try to keep mine short.
Could we put up the photos that were taken today that show the blue line? Is that the blue line or the red line? The ones looking from the other direction. Looking from Zicachina to the north? Or maybe I'm thinking of my pictures. So I just, and I can send you my pictures, but when you walk out there with the tape down and you look from Zicachina's to the north and watch and see how much the facade's going to come out, it's jarring. And there's this beautiful line, yeah, you've got, but you can't see very well with the lighting, but there's this beautiful architectural line that goes all along Riverside Drive that is the face of Bridge Park. And building out is going to be a huge interruption to that experience. And this is people moving from the hotel to the bridge to go across to the, I think there's going to be a lot of movement there. I am not in favor of altering the planters. I am not in favor of building out. I think the restaurant can reside within the right-of-way line. And I actually like the canopy. You could still have the canopy, everything just pushed back. The canopy is something that ties it all together architecturally. I have no problem with that. I do object to the 8 feet. I'm dealing this with projects right now, and 8 feet is not sufficient in cities like Bexley. In Columbus, the standard is 10 feet for a sidewalk, no, for a multi-use path. I think their sidewalk, urban sidewalk, is even wider than that. I just think this route needs to maintain that 12 feet. So that's my one comment. And then the second comment, if you could pull out the rendering that was back up. This is the 100% corner, as I said before, of Bridge Park. It's the iconic, what you see coming across the bridge. And we're asking it to do a lot of things in this discussion. So you want this corner to engage the public right away. You want it to be part of the architecture of Block B, right? Block B. And then it also is trying to serve the tenant space. And I think all of those are not aligned right now. They're conflicting. And I think the challenge in this exercise, it's a design challenge, is to bring all those three elements together in harmony, in unity. And right now, they're all fighting each other. The building architecture and the column are fighting with the design of the tenant space and the pocket plaza below it. I think this needs a lot more study, and this corner is way too important. The investment that the city's made in the pedestrian bridge, and then inviting people to Dublin, to Bridge Park, historic Dublin, and to come across, and this corner should just be incredibly powerful. And right now, all these elements are fighting against each other because there's too many different desires in trying to create this space. So that would be my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Suplak.
The palette is nice, right? I think it came a long way since since we have seen it last. I appreciate a wealth of things you have going on here, including, we're finally getting to see sort of the branding package that goes with it and what that invites relative to the material palette. So there's a wealth of good that I think is coming together in that regard. And I actually think that there is generally from the elevation on the west, looking at it is nice. The sign sits in a nice little sort of reset, in an appropriate sort of jog in the building. The main sign sits in an appropriate jog in the building. The approach there is good. Likewise, on the other side, on the north face, in and of itself, yes. The canopy is good. There's, again, a wealth of, you see the coach lights, the marquee lights, the sort of font there sort of alluding to a wealth of the wrought iron that you're using throughout. I'm on the fence about, I don't mind the bump out, but I'm back and forth with where Mr. Way was on that it pinches, I'm worried it pinches too far. And I think it could move back into the building 2 feet and still not greatly affect your interior plans. Maybe you give up a chair on the bar by pinching that or whatnot. So it could get there. I appreciate little touches like the gelato cart. That's a nice cute moment. And then, of course, I think we are all sort of struggling with the pocket park on the corner and what it is and how it's effective. I think right now, I applaud you. You all tried to make it work. There's a mix of uses, and we did probably encourage that mix of uses spilling out of the restaurant and hopefully coming in from the outside, but it's just not there. Right now it comes across as a wealth of the elements that you have, the palette basically, and then it's a mix, right? Like it all of a sudden just becomes a mix of those things in there, but it's not as effective as it could be. And I think we commissioners worry that will be, we'd be remiss if we don't try and figure out how to do better. You asked what's the use, right? What's the potential use? Who would go there? And I think where you were going with it, this is a busy corner. This is a busy vehicular corner. It's not going to be easily conducive to, right, the most comfortable of just, this is where I'm going to hang out, right? But I do think the use case Warren alluded to, right, where are we meeting? We're meeting across the street from the bridge is a very good use case, right? As good as any. I could also see relative to Valentina's, I started going, what would you put in here that sort of makes sense relative to what you guys are doing and what we want? And, I'm not advocating for this, but does it become like, a tongue-in-cheek bocce ball court, right, real quick? And of course, I'm not advocating for that, but then that starts to go to, is this the point at which, right, we tether in chess tables, right? One of those that all of a sudden mentally, and you have the black and white palette, and all of a sudden mentally says some measure of tether into something like that. I'm not advocating for that. Maybe I'm just advocating, much like everyone else, is that the pocket park is not there. I'm on board for a wealth of a good bit of the rest of what's going on, but the pocket park is not there, and I wonder even if you went back to the office and challenged some kid and said, listen, the design parameters are make it so the city wants to come here, right? Not a little less from the restaurant spilling out, but the city wants to come here and see what he or she gets to, and see if you can then derive that and couple it into this effectively or not. I do think there's a lot of merit to the art, and unfortunately, it's one of those things. I know it's scratching the surface here, right? A great piece of art would really make this sing and make this an experience that I sort of wander through and all that. Well, then it demands, what is that piece of art, and how far can we get down the path relative to this design without impeding the speed of this design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's a lot of merit there, potentially, to discern what that is and how it interacts with, again, to the point, the building, the total building, and the Valentina's sort of mass at the bottom, and how it engages on both sides. So I think there's potential. I think there's a lot of potential in that corner. I think we can't collectively give up on it yet. We need to continue to try and make it amazing and balance public-private appropriately so that it's intuitive and natural, and that the public naturally shifts in there. I will also add to, this is maybe just a design concern. In your renderings, I actually really like the plants at the top of the canopy, right? Now, I readily recognize all the litany of problems that they invite. So I'm trying to solve for, well, how do I achieve what that's doing in a manner, right, that still gets there? And I don't know if it's right, but I'm going to say, I don't know how it marries into this aesthetic. I don't know how, if it's right conceptually, but I'm going to point you towards iron crusting, roof iron crusting, which is, the 12-inch sort of wrought iron across the top of, even Italian Village, Victorian Village. Does that all of a sudden make sense and achieve kind of what you're doing there, but now with a materiality that is not fake plants in an effective manner? I don't know the answer to that. It's for you to sort of unpack a little more appropriately. I will also say if this, and I'm asking a question, maybe this is a question for staff. So we do have at various pocket parks around this area, we do have chairs, Adirondacks, what have you. They do move. And I guess I'm going to, right now, the way we're talking about this, all the chairs and everything is rendered tight into the space of the footprint. But of course, that's going to sort of creep out. I actually think that's good, right? This is a big corner, and how do you more consider that? Now, that's not, what I mean? I don't know if that's their purview to do, but I guess I'm going to, if this becomes a seating area and there are mobile elements, they are going to expand out, and is that so bad or not? Or is that actually good? Just a consideration in all of it. I don't know that I have. I think that's where I'm at, and I will say, Randy, sincerely, I appreciate the design. I think is really getting there. I think you heard it loud and clear tonight. There is a lot of concern about the park and how do we make it the right thing. You know what I mean? Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I forgot to mention that I am not in favor of expanding the building out. We didn't even get into that except Mr. Way did. I have to say again, I agree with Mr. Way 100%. But the expanding the building, that would eliminate a lot of the problems. And I agree with most everything the rest of my colleagues.
Thank you. I'm going to touch on a few things. I echo a lot of my fellow commissioners. This design has come leaps and bounds. This is, I mean, it's really looking phenomenal. In a conversation earlier this week, I even highlighted the canopies. I love that they're solid across, but there's delineation. There's the change in color there to a solid color that blends in the background, but you still get the benefit of the canopy at that segmentation. I think the color palette is wonderful. Mr. Supelak touched on the branding package. We're really seeing the branding package come together, and it looks lovely. The lighting, it's fantastic. You look at the variation in the lighting, and you've heard kind of our conversations, the French bistro, the French cafe, and you saw Jane's kind of vision images and that sort of thing. We're trying really hard to articulate something that's a little out of our wheelhouse, so thank you for your patience as we've gone through these things. I echo Mr. Way's comments we're asking a very small space and smaller when we're shrinking sidewalk and shrinking planter to do a lot of things. And so the interplay between the public and private, I think that we could overcome the seating issue. Public knows benches. There are some really pretty benches, and if they were pointed the opposite direction of the restaurant, that goes a long way to getting those benches identified as public seating so that the person can take their lunch over there and feel perfectly comfortable occupying that chair. Now, if the restaurant staff comes out and says something, then of course that's an issue we would have to overcome in the future. The sidewalk width, we all know Riverside Drive. We all know the Riverside Drive speeds. We know why the planters were designed to be wider on Riverside Drive than they were on the adjacent parcels. Mr. Supelak pointed out the arterial nature versus the more neighborhood or more business-oriented streets. And I still have, 8 feet is not very wide. We're living in, I won't even say post, we're living in a pandemic world. And I see people walking by each other on 8-foot trails right now, and there's 2 people, and they're hugging the sides of the trail. And so having a corner like this that is so populated, that restaurant's gonna drive traffic. whether that's they're going just to look at the building because it's a pretty darn spectacular looking building, or they're meeting up for that cup of coffee or for that run. It's going to drive traffic there. And that's not even to say the traffic that's already there. So shrinking that sidewalk is a concern to me. We're going to have a lot of people. That's one of the reasons why the restaurant wants to be there, is we're going to drive a lot of people to these areas, and shrinking the available space for those people to occupy could have the opposite effect, could have the, I don't want to go down there because I feel like cattle being herded. A couple of items. Again, I mentioned the lighting packages. I think they're phenomenal. The only concern that I have with lighting is the string lights are secured by posts. And those posts are not very good looking. They're very useful, utilitarian. They're there and they perform a function. But I think there's opportunity there to incorporate the branding package, incorporate some of the lessons learned. On the art and the green space, I agree. You know, when we talk about public plazas, and I'll note the difference between the public park and the public plaza, we do talk about the different items that can be in this pocket plaza, and art is called out, and art isn't always part of green space, and green space isn't always part of art. But I think there's opportunity, since staff is recommending the removal of the hanging plants, can the art be where the hanging plants were? Can it be incorporated into that lighting package? Can it accomplish that same visual articulation and differentiation that the plants currently offer? I also am concerned, I articulated earlier the concern about the sidewalk width, whether that's the planter shrinking, the building coming out, the seating areas, the seating orientation toward the business and not toward public. I think those all go together. And then last comment, you mentioned the tree dying in the planter. One of the commission's concerns early on was all of the vegetation was centered in those planters. So if the planters shrink and if the vegetation is on its way out, recentering the new vegetation would be appreciated. Sorry, I apologize. I was longer-winded than I normally am. Looking back to the commission, any final deliberation, final comments? Mr. Suplak.
Forgive me, it actually goes back to the sidewalk. I think there's growing concern about pinching that sidewalk. There's growing concern about, the thoroughfare on that side. I guess I'm realizing as I listen to you, Rebecca, I'm not necessarily averse, and maybe this is much staff, I'm not necessarily averse to, we're stealing from the bed in order to expand the sidewalk. The bed is still 13 feet. We are adjacent a pretty substantial roadway. We want to feel like we're protected is what it comes down to. Now, we can do that with distance, or we can do that with a bigger kind of perceived barrier. So as long as we're adjusting the beds, I guess I'm saying, if our value judgment is saying we want the sidewalk, as an adequate dose, I'm saying I'm not averse to adjusting that bed, so it's different, starts to become different in a way that makes appropriate sense, but starts to grow vertically, if that makes sense, or taller walls, or that still establishes the perceived psychological safety that the beds now provide, if that all makes sense.
And one follow-up to that, if the elevation of the planter were changed, that gives opportunity for it to be now L-shaped, which then could provide seating that would be perceived as public and therefore accomplish both objectives.
And Randy, I too am not really in favor of the sort of truncated poles for the Tivoli. Just neither here nor there, right? Like, if those continue to be an element in any way, shape, or form, I don't know. They need a little more help.
And then I missed one item in my comments. I realize that we're a little early, but this commission is pretty stickler on keeping to code for signage, and the number of signage elements, especially on the awnings, is just in my perusal in significant excess of what would be permitted.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you mind if we provide a couple of additional staff clarifications regarding items that have been discussed, just for the record and for the consideration of the group?
Please.
So first and foremost, I'd like to talk about the Pocket Plaza and what it means to have publicly accessible open space. Every single open space within Bridge Park is located on private property and is accessible to the public and has a public kind of a public-private partnership element to it. And this is also intended to be that way. So just to clarify that this, other than the design elements, would not be any different than any other open space. Additional items, staff is recommending approval of the waiver for the building encroachment as well as the streetscape modifications. And the reason for doing so is that as you approach this intersection, the planters do not narrow, but they are much narrower north of the intersection. So it really is an appropriate continuum. If a tenant further down the block, like C. Cucina, was making the same request, I definitely agree with Mr. Supalak that that would not be appropriate at that location, given the speed limit and the volume of traffic coming out of that roundabout. But as you slow to this intersection, which obviously is going to become very pedestrian oriented and even more so, the possibility of kind of tapering that planter does not seem in planning and engineering's review like a safety issue. Otherwise, we'd not recommend approval of that. In regards to changing kind of the elevation and mass and scale of those planters, I'll let Michael speak to that because I know there would be some traffic concerns.
Yeah, Michael Hendershot, engineering with the City of Dublin. Just as far as if we're increasing the planter height, something to keep in mind that we would be looking at is sight distance triangles and making sure those aren't too high to where we're impeding visibility at that intersection. So that's just a consideration that we would be looking at if that were to move forward.
Okay. And just a few other items of clarification because this is such a complicated project. I know there was some mention of the master sign plan. We would certainly work with the applicant to ensure these signs are tailored to meet the master sign plan. There are a variety of alternatives for some of those canopy signs that indicate that this is a restaurant. Window graphics that are not signs are permitted, so we would work with them.
Looking back to the commission, any final comments, questions, concerns, items of discussion? All right. Well, Nikki, I think we have our work cut out for us. Could I have you present the 9 conditions that we are asked to look at for the minor project?
Would you like to start with the minor project or the waiver?
I think we want to start with the minor project.
Okay, great. These are the first 4, and then the remaining 5 are on the next page.
All right, I'm going to go to the applicant here first, looking at just these 4 conditions on the minor project review. The first one, the removal of the hanging planters. Do you have any concern with that?
Removing the hanging planters, is that what you're asking?
Removing the hanging planters and working with the Arts Commission to look at a piece of
regarding, it sounds like there's 2 separate pathways we're discussing here. The Pocket Plaza and then the design of the space itself, right? I mean, I think that's pretty much how all the conversations have gone. Is there a way we can segment off the Pocket Plaza as a separate path, as a condition, to continue to work through that and then review the rest of it separately? Is that a process or a path that we could discuss?
Yeah, that's certainly something that we've done in other situations before. Typically, we would require some sort of trigger point for you all to come back before the commission with another design. I think in this case, you know, we, from a staff perspective, would certainly want you to be able to advance your project, but recognize that maybe prior to submitting a building permit, you would come back to the commission to finalize this open space design.
Does the commission feel that would be an appropriate or a good idea to do that? Look at them as separate elements, because that's kind of how we're reviewing them, or what's the thought process there? The goal is to get the project moving, and the Pocket Plaza seems to be the main point of contention.
So I'll speak for myself, then I'll look to the commission. Because of the interplay and because part of the Pocket Plaza is going to be utilized for seating for the restaurant, I don't see a way to keep those lines blurred, but yet delineated for the sake of approvals. So looking to the commission.
To me, it's all the part of the corner, and it needs to be thought of together.
I concur. Unfortunately, I mean, I know it puts you guys in a hard spot, but unfortunately, I agree. It's all interwoven right there.
All right, so I think we're going to have a little bit of a hard time this evening to go through each one of these. So I'm looking to you. Do you want us to deliberate, to go through these items, and to look for a motion this evening?
I think, based on the simple math, it appears that we would not get a positive vote tonight. That would be our guess after your comments. So we're going to table tonight and address this later. The area where we're struggling is there's just a lot of contradicting information that we're trying to juggle. For instance, you're saying the Pocket Plaza needs to be separate from the restaurant, but then we're getting comments that they need to be integrated. So there's a lot of confusion from our standpoint about what that means. Does that make sense? Like, can we speak to that just a little more? Because I guess we're not really understanding how is it integrated, but then it can't be interacting with the restaurant. They're conflicting points.
So I think right now, if how about this? The design is integrated, right? All the parts have to work at this corner and work well. I think it was very clearly, and you are trying to capitalize and spill out onto it, appropriately so, in a certain regard. But right now, it very much feels like it's barriered in, it's your space and only your space. And I think, you know what I mean, it's to the point of it's a fine line. And how does it feel? How does it perceptively become more of a public accessed space in an effective manner is the big question. I might also offer from my vantage point that of all this, and I articulated, of all this, the design on the two sides, I really like. It's good. I still think the corner is sort of this strange amalgamation of stuff that just needs to, somebody needs to noodle on that and love on it and cook it a little more thoroughly is what it comes down to. I think the public-private and the perception of access, I think is fundamentally sort of not right now.
So I would agree that the design has to be integrated, but I think both uses have to be accomplished. The public use needs to be accomplished, and the private use is very well accomplished, but we don't see that public use yet.
So if the design's integrated, it's going to look like part of the restaurant, and it's going to then conflict with the public use point is the challenge we're struggling with. And I'm not trying to sound argumentative. I'm really just trying to get to the bottom of where to take this at this point, and just make sure we head down the right path.
Nikki, could you bring up the image of the corner? I'm especially interested in the not Riverside Drive plane here. So you're kind of looking down, and I think that's just based on the coloring, I think that's a piece of the gelato cart right there. So from the overhead view, you have the seating area that's the bench and the couple of chairs that are pointed in. You have the 3, I think, tables along the wall. All of that is oriented in. And on this one, it is very blatantly Pocket Plaza stamped right in within that seating area that is directed toward the restaurant.
So
that
if that,
to me looks like a waiting area for a restaurant. If you pivot it, and now it faces outward, now it looks like it is public seating.
so if the railing went away and it became more free-floating tables at that point, you have a door in place here, so liquor boundaries aren't necessarily a concern either.
See, I think tables are an issue. To Mr. Fishman's point, tables indicate this is where you go to eat at a restaurant. The seating area, I think, is a lovely idea, but it looks like it's a seating area for the restaurant. If it's a seating area for a Pocket Plaza, I think it takes on a different feel. It accomplishes a different use.
So the group would be more receptive if we were to, just as off the top of your head, mirror that seating group, eliminated the railing, so that it's backing up to the building, facing out towards the intersection. Is that something that would be received well by the 5 of you?
If we were to draw sharp lines, if those tables were eliminated and there was some interesting approachable seating, it would probably shift the line to, wow, this is really public space and everybody's going to be comfortable. And to your point, you would presumably lose any sort of outdoor seating in that area. So I respect and empathize with your position. If that's one area, if that's one end of the continuum, how do you mix those so you can get some use out of that area as well? I don't have an answer for that, but this seems, as I think we're all saying, it's all the seating is faced towards the restaurant, the quote public seating, and those tables are private. I mean, there's like no way to color them any differently.
And I don't think we're saying take away your outdoor seating for your restaurant use. Right now, the angle of that seating arrangement is, concave toward the restaurant. If the railing moves now on the other side and is convex, and that seating arrangement is now pointed outward, you keep your seating arrangement, your tables, but now that is a public seating area.
Yeah.
I'm walking up the street on the sidewalk, and I sit without walking around a railing. It becomes that public play.
Can you point me to a public plaza in Dublin that's successful that we can go visit and reference, or a couple?
I would look to staff.
Well, actually, I would prefer if you guys could point us to one or a general location, because I get the feeling there's a standard or a level or something you're trying to get us to.
Yeah, pocket plazas, correct me if I'm wrong, pocket plazas are somewhat unique to Bridge Street District Code. Bridge Street is brand new, and so all of the pocket plazas, I think, have we seen 2?
So we have a variety of examples of pocket plazas. We'd have to review Bridge Park's open space plan to identify other ones for you. But I think, in terms of identifying successful furnishing, there are a variety of examples of that throughout the city. I think the CML library has some nice examples of public site furnishing.
Because I get the feeling each of you obviously have something in mind that you're trying to achieve here. And we're obviously disconnecting when we go to get there. So if you guys could point us to a reference or an example, even if it's not in Bridge Park, if it's anywhere that we could look at as what we're trying to achieve, that would give us something to at least try and understand the perspectives. And I know Nikki and staff are pointing us to other pocket plazas, and that's helpful. But at the end of the day, it's your opinion that's guiding us, and that we need to align with. And I just want to, if there's something we can reference that's similar, just so we can understand the point you're trying to achieve.
Mr. Fishman?
I think that it's the same old, same old. I think we're trying to put too much restaurant in too little space. I'm not in favor of expanding the building. I think we need the open space to stay as big as it is. I think the more I hear the conversation, I don't think we should give up the sidewalk space. And so I think you've got to kind of, I think the effort is tremendous. The restaurant is beautiful, but I think that we want the public space. We want to delineate it as public space. And I think Ms. Call's suggestion about facing them out, I think we have to even do a little more than that, because I think that people aren't comfortable. If it looks like a restaurant and there's tables right there, they're not going to go sit down next to the tables. Okay, so I think your effort's great, but I think that it's too much restaurant in too little space. I think you have to kind of go back to the drawing board on that. And I think expanding the building is a bad idea. So that's my comment. I think your effort is tremendous. I just think it needs more work.
Mr. Schnee.
Dwelling on it, I was actually thinking of outside of the North Market, the seating there, which is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, pardon me, that could be a good precedent as well. This is not the seating outside of North Market. This is actually in front of the future entrance to this tenant space, but this is Sweetwater Coffee, their movable seating and chairs. I do appreciate the applicant's request for additional direction, because we obviously want to make sure that we're meeting the commission's expectations. I guess from a staff perspective, I would tend to recommend that they incorporate some of the design language of other previously approved and used seating in Bridge Park, so people can kind of subconsciously recognize that and potentially feel comfortable. I think there's also an opportunity here to capitalize on the Parisian cafe theme. I mean, potentially the types of movable seating and chairs that could be selected would be not conducive to dinner service. Like literally ones that can move around and people can pick them up and play card games. So I think there are design opportunities here. I think just to echo the applicant's concerns, providing a little bit of additional direction this evening. Alternatively, I think staff would welcome urban design photos if you have those and would like to share those subsequent to the meeting.
So understanding that we have a request to table this evening, and understanding there's a request for additional detail and additional articulation of what the commission is looking for, would the applicant and staff be amenable to this commission working with staff on an individual basis to provide and to have staff prepare Pocket Plaza information to present to the commission to return to the applicant, so that the applicant has better direction as to what the commission is looking for after this item is tabled, before it comes back to us?
I mean, we can certainly coordinate. My clarification is, did you want that coordination to happen behind the scenes, or you actually want staff to report back at a meeting?
What I'm actually looking for is this puts the onus on staff. You have 7 people who sometimes have very different opinions.
Right.
To come together and say, okay, this is what we received from everyone. These are the commonalities. Can the commission agree that this is what we are going to return to the applicant for the look and feel of what the commission's looking for?
Okay.
But that does put the onus on staff. So would staff be amenable to that we could then return that to the applicant?
And I mean, just for, you want to speak that? I guess just from an additional clarification standpoint, would you be looking for a memo from staff summarizing the feedback at these various points?
Correct.
And trying to tally the comments that have been made and where members of the commission fall? I just want to make it as
I don't
useful.
necessarily think tally. I think what we're looking for is a consensus among the commission, the commonalities that you find from the commission. If there's one person who says that the building should be painted pink and purple and, the public art should be, something very specific, then obviously that is not the voice of the commission. However, if there is a consensus, because I think you are hearing a lot of that this evening, the space is, trying to do too much. You heard, yeah, there's too much restaurant and too little space. We're saying somewhat the same things, just using different language. And so if you can take individual, because we don't want to be quorum coming together working with staff, but individual, we will supply our feedback and some design or ideas from our own research, and then bringing that together, returning it to the commission and saying, this is what we are thinking based on all of your individual feedback. Can you approve this? And then after that has happened, then going back to the applicant.
Mr. Boggs, can you tell us what we can do and can't do in this regard?
Right. So first of all, I think that, one thing that we need to remember is that this is an administrative action. So like the facts that we're working from have to be things that are put on the record here in front of, in the public hearing. As in terms of individual members of the commission speaking with staff, that is fine. What we can't do is have sort of like a round robin discussion. It can't be, Ms. Call speaks to staff, and then staff says, oh, Ms. Call said X, Y, Z. What do you think, Mr. Fishman? So we can't be doing that. It would be taking individual feedback.
Correct.
And I think that what you're really trying to do is find the language to articulate what you're looking for. Because as I sit here, also as not a design professional, I hear a lot of, it's like what you want is just out of reach in terms of your ability to articulate it. So getting that information to staff on an individual basis, that as far as I am concerned, staff could then create a compilation of that to provide to the applicant, so that when the applicant comes back, they're armed with that compilation document would be part of the public record. We could accept that at the next meeting, and they could come back and present to you. And then you actually have your deliberation here.
Correct.
So all of, those steps we could do, and do it in an open meeting compliant way.
Mr. Wade, did you have a comment?
I was stuck on wanting to give some cues to the applicant about what they might do differently. And one of them is the operable windows between the restaurant and the pocket booths. Make it feel like it's part of the restaurant. If that was solid windows that weren't open, there's glass and you can see through it. So that's one issue that I think this has right now. The other is, I think it's been said before, it's all these elements that wall the space off from the right-of-way. If you just flip that, so it's almost like you're facing out towards the right-of-way, the elements, right? So it's feeling like you're opening up outward as opposed to looking back towards the restaurant. Right now it feels like, again, you're focused on the restaurant. And then the third thing is the column is a fundamental part of that space. And you haven't done anything with it. It just feels so foreign. And that's why I said it's conflicting things. I could see that column and the underside of the balcony being part of that space. So think three-dimensionally about it. And then all of a sudden you're creating this three-dimensional space that has a roof, it has walls, and it has this opening out to the public environment. That would make this space feel totally different. And I'm not trying to design it. I'm just saying those fundamental cues, getting rid of all the elements that separate it from the public right-of-way, but make it feel part of the public right-of-way, I think would go a long way. But again, I go back to my original statement. You've got all these three big conflicting things about what this wants to be. And I think the design exercise is in that piece that I just described. It's not two-dimensional. It's almost like multidimensional. And you've really got to think of it in total, because you're trying to create this vibe with the restaurant that forms two edges of the space, and that in itself is then a conflict, because this space doesn't want to be necessarily part of the restaurant. So
Can I supplement? I don't know that I would advocate, and I know we've danced and said we started to get really specific, and it starts to get really designed for you, right? And that's hard for me, even as a designer, to listen and know that that's what's going to happen, and then you give the client what they want, and you turn those chairs around, and voila, right? Like, are we there? And it's kind, you know what I mean? It can end up just as bad if you do exactly as we say. So where I'm going, and what I want to articulate in hopes that maybe it can help you get where I think everyone is touching on is, and everything Kim just articulated, right? Sometimes it's, you know how this is. You guys are good designers. Sometimes it's body language, right? It's not what they're saying, it's body language. And the body language of this space is saying, this is Valentina's. That's what it's saying. And so could it be, you know what I mean? You scrub out the tables? Yeah, that would change it. Could it be that those doors that appear to open up and flow out, you know what I mean, get shut in and aren't doors? Yeah, that would change it. Could it be that we eliminate the fence, right? Remove a barrier? Yeah, that would change it too. Could it be that we turn those chairs around? Yes, that would change it too. The body language would change with all of those things. I don't know of that set. I don't want to tell you to do one or another. I want to say that the body language has to change so it feels like how about this? There's no reason any of us, unless we were eating at this restaurant, would sit down in that space right now. And that's part of the problem. We want it to feel everything she showed of Sweetwater, and it's really remedial, but to the point of you can imagine yourself just walking down the street and sitting down there, whether you went to Sweetwater or not, right? There is something about, I joked about sort of, right, like the chess tables, but the chess tables mentally are a cue, to your point about cues, they're mentally a cue that change how you reflect on that space, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, I can just sit down there, whether I'm gonna play chess or not. Right, so there's all of these possibilities, I think, just reshape. The space is not right, it's really sort of really Valentina's right now. We're not saying it can't be in part Valentina's, we're not saying Valentina can't, because you're right, the energy coming out there will in part come from Valentina's. But how do you adjust the cues so it's less barriered, so it's more, you know what I mean, open, so it's more inviting generally off the street? I think that's all this is. And I guess you guys are good designers. You can get there, right, given a moment to take a breath and sort of treat it with a little bit of that lens on it.
And I think you'll hear the creative brain, the personality, the space, and the very analytical, that use is not being accomplished. The public use is not being accomplished. And I think you're hearing that just using different language. So with that being said, would you be amenable to staff preparing that compilation to return to you in what the commission is looking for? We will do our due diligence, our homework, and provide that information to staff so that the next time we come back, we can have that discussion with the creative brain, the analytical brain.
That would be helpful to review, yes.
Perfect. All right, has any public comment been received on this item?
No.
Thank you. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to table at the applicant's request.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
Mr. Supalack?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Schneer?
Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your partnership. I hope that as we continue to move through this project, we can come up with something that is wonderful for Valentina's, wonderful for the property owner, and for the city as a whole. So thank you very much. All right, staff, looking to you for communications this evening.
So I just have one quick item, and if everyone has their calendar handy, it's going to require some discussion of date. We have been working very diligently with the Llewellyn Farms neighborhood, as well as the commercial property owner, NRI, related to the DCAP, and have come to a proposed resolution that everyone is agreeable to, so, which is great news. And we want to bring forward then the code and the guidelines related to that. And when we had previously discussed that application a couple of months ago, there seemed to be a desire from the commission to have some dedicated time to review that in detail. So we were looking at a special meeting, and I am looking at September the 23rd, which is a Thursday, as an option to have that meeting. Yes. Hate to put you on the spot, just wanting to, no? Okay.
In the evening, same.
Yes, same time, same place.
Yes. That's why we get the big bucks.
What?
That's why we get the big bucks, is, you know.
Yes, it would be 3 meetings in a row.
Bad,
but-
no laughing.
So Kim was a no. Mark, what is your?
I'm out of town.
You're out of
that
town,
night.
okay.
I think I'm good.
Okay. So we might have to go with the majority. And Jane, I think, was available. You said.
Jane said, confirmed, yes, she was available.
You're good, okay.
So what would be the meetings in,
The meeting's what? I'm sorry.
what would be the meetings in September?
So we have tonight, and then we have the 16th, and then we have the 23rd, potentially. Because we need to properly notice, so I can't do it next week because I need to notice all the residents and I need to.
I'm out of town anyway.
Okay, finish my updates. Prepare the materials, yeah.
Does it have to be a Thursday?
Not necessarily.
Could it be the day before?
That would be, that
Wednesday?
would work for me, yeah.
I don't know Jane's schedule on the 22nd. She did confirm that she was available both the 23rd and the 30th.
Wednesday will be bad for me. I'll be out.
Looks like we have at least quorum.
At least a quorum,
I was
okay.
going to say, what do we need?
We only need 4.
Okay, all right, well, we'll go with the 23rd since we have quorum, sorry, Kim. But just again, to keep this moving forward, because again, the agendas in October are looking pretty full, so I just want to make sure you have time to, and again, I'm assuming it's going to come back more than once, just knowing our review cycle, that we're going to take a detailed look at this, and then it'll be back then at a future meeting, so, and you could always provide me comments ahead of time, too, so. Just so we can get your feedback. So anyway, okay, thank you. That is the only item that I have. Does anybody have anything for us?
I have a couple of items. One is just documentation. So you saw me bring in my hoard of documentation. I wanted the commission to look at that and make sure that you have copies, if you desire hard copies of all of the items that I have. You don't know what you don't know. So if staff or the rest of the commission says, hey, do you have all the documentation you need? Well, you don't know what you don't know. So I brought mine for reference. The Bridge Street District Code, I don't know that I have a hard copy of. And so that would be my request, is a copy of that. So that's item number 1. And then the second item, we kind of had a benefit during COVID that all of our meetings had little pictures with names on them. And since we've been having in-person meetings, even when the applicant comes up to the microphone, it's really hard, like Randy, I don't know if his last name is McBirdy. That's kind of what it sounded like. So is there a way that staff could prepare for applicants that you know are going to be in attendance, put names of applicants on the chair agenda? That would be very helpful so that I don't call Kim Way, Ms. Way, the first time that I see him on an agenda, but rather have a name and don't.
He's much nicer than Kim.
And don't stick my foot in my mouth.
I didn't take any offense to that.
Thank you, very much appreciated. So if that's
a great
possible.
suggestion, we can do that.
And then I brought up earlier in the week, one of the things that I did when I first moved to Dublin was I went through Citizen U, and Citizen U was fantastic. Warren and B were in my class at Citizen U. But one of the things that we did was we took a field trip and we went to all of the city departments and we talked to the individuals there and learned more about what the process was. On Planning and Zoning Commission, we don't deal with every department, but we deal with a lot of them. You know, when we're talking to engineering, when we're talking to, you know, when we're talking about parks, when we're talking all of these different departments, we're reading about requirements and we're looking and saying, okay, yes, we can make an exception. No, we can't make an exception. But we don't have relationships necessarily with each of the department staff. So it was my recommendation that this commission take field trip or trips to meet each one of these departments and also to get more familiar with their processes. So when we went to the streets department, they actually printed out using the same material as the street signs, little Dublin almost license plates, so to speak. But we got to see some of what they do. And it really, I leverage that knowledge here in Planning and Zoning Commission very frequently, and I think it would be beneficial to the entire commission. And I've probably forgotten as much as I currently remember. So it would be a nice refresher for myself. So looking to the commission for support, or Rebecca, you're cracked kind of feedback? Perfect. And there are some issues we'll have to overcome with noticing and, you know, that sort of thing, but you know, we can work with staff and get that done.
Okay, yeah, I can lift that request up to our volunteer coordinator. She was the one that was in charge of that, so see what the logistics would look like for that.
Christina.
Nardekia.
Yep, perfect. Any other communications from the commission? Happy September, everybody. All right, with that, I'll adjourn us. It's the only time I want to use the gavel.
Where did you get these?
They were here. Do we have another Park and Rec's master plan? It looks like Warren doesn't.